We're not.
You are live. My man. Awesome. Very cool. All right. So people tuning in, you're probably like, that's not Matt. I'm not Matt. Nope. About half as good looking, about a quarter as smart, but Matt is out this week, so you're stuck with me. So I've been with Crossover. My name is Zach. Been with Crossover for about 10, 11 years. I got a pretty big background in baseball, so they plugged me in to chat with, as always, Jordan and Ryan, who are probably two of the most smart, baseball-minded humans I've ever. I used to think I knew a lot about baseball until I met you guys. So, but apparently long balls and K zones and bat flips, there's more to baseball than that. So, so yeah, every time I chat with you guys, I love it. So anyway, today's topic, we're talking about the scary yips. So this hits home with me, mainly because my background, this defined a lot of my career. So just a little bit of background in my career. So I played junior college ball, then played at the university level. So, and I thought I was the bee's knees back then. And turns out the Yips had another idea, another plan for me. So, so today we're just gonna kind of go over what they are. We're gonna talk about some remedies, somehow how we personally dealt with it. I know being baseball guys, I had it twice actually. So we're just going to talk about basically how they came about for each of us, our kind of personal experiences. We're going to talk about some preventative measures. It's not going to happen to everybody, but everybody's different. So we're just going to kind of go over the basics of what they are, how they are, when they are, get a little scientific with it, but also get just a little real about how us here at Crossover and ArmCare have also dealt with it. So I'll start off with my yips. So this is back in high school. I didn't know what they were. So I didn't know that was a thing until I got them. So back in high school, I remember I was, we were playing spring break down in Florida, and I was pretty heavily recruited at this time. I hadn't committed anywhere, but I thought I was going to go do something big. I was pretty high on myself, and there's a two scouts at our practice. They came to one of our practices for our games, and I remember, and I never had a pro scout at a game before, and he wasn't even scouting us. He was a friend of a dad, and we were just warming up on some random field, and I was a shortstop, and so we were just taking ground balls. And I remember there's no fence behind our first baseman, and so I knew if I airmailed it or buried it, then he was going to have to run freaking a ways to get it. So I was like, all right, scout's looking. Like, I had a good arm. I was like, all right, just don't throw it over his head, because if he does, he's going to have to run a long way. And so sure enough, I sorted it over his head, and he had to run a long way. I was like, oh, that sucked. And then another ground ball comes to me, throw it, airmailed it again. And I was like, well, that was weird. And all of a sudden kind of get those bubbly feelings in my stomach. And I was like, something's different, but not right. Got another one. I was like, all right, I'm not airmailing it. I buried it. And then from then on, I could not figure it out. And I don't know what it was, but I could throw it 90 across the infield, but I didn't know where it was going. And in my mind, I had no idea what it was, how it was, but it was bad. So, and then that was my senior year too. So, and I think my errors kind of contributed to where I ended up, but I think everything happens for a reason. But yeah, that was my first stint. So, I think Yogi Berra said it. He said, baseball is 90% mental and 90% mental, and the other half's physical. And I truly believe that's a real thing. And I found that out the hard way. But as far as you, Jordan, I know you had your case. What happened to you?
Yeah. So mine was my first year playing in professional baseball, where I was playing for Tijuana, Mexico. And I had just come off of my senior year of college, where I was used a lot. And then I went into pro ball, where I was a spot starter and reliever. I was signed for 78 games, like the second half of the season, roughly the last 2/3 of the season. And I threw in 65, 67 games. I was like used every day. Jeez. So mine initially started because it was the beginning stages of an injury. And I ended up getting an MRI and all these things, but I had so much inflammation that my whole arm would go numb. And then for me, that was kind of the beginning stages of it, to where once I recovered, it got better. But it always kind of sat in the back of my mind. I'm like, what if this comes back? And then there was times where I just couldn't throw. So once I would kind of get over that, it would kind of swing in, swing out, swing in, swing out. But there's always those little tiny things of that was the genesis of mine. Was I went from having a pretty structured schedule to getting used practically every day with road trips, horrendous gas station food, and just not taking care of the things that I didn't know that you needed to take care of. If I would have known now what I knew then, and I could do a post exam, I would not do the same throwing every day. I would have changed my routine and I could have avoided it. But mine was
You're
so
healthy,
much
yeah.
neurological fatigue that I literally lost feeling on my hand. It always felt like I had just fallen asleep on my arm. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I'd still go out there and go to post, and I would kind of get guys out, but it kept getting worse as I got on, to where I would be throwing balls, I'd miss by 15 feet. And then if there's a PFP, unless I like just slung the spaghetti noodle of one arm pretty much at the time, I didn't know where it was going. So that was the beginning of it. And then it would disappear, and then it would always show up. It was always there for the first like 10 throws of the day. So I always had it for the first 10 throws, just in my mind. I'm over it now, but it was just there.
Gosh, dude, that's tough. So yeah, yours came from injury. Mine was just being pretty soft, in my opinion. Ryan, you've had a serious career. Have you had the yips?
You know, I did have an experience with that. I was in high school, and we were in a playoff game, and I remember it was a double round knockout. So, our team wasn't very good. We didn't want to lose, obviously, but one of the games that we lost, and we ended up going further, but it was hard for me to recover, is that I threw a walk-off error,
Oh no.
Yeah. And it was pretty bad because I knew that we win this game, we're going to be in a different bracket. It'll be easier to progress. And there was a runner on third, 2 outs, tie ball game, bottom of the ninth. I fielded it, and I could tell that the throw was going to be bad because I caught my cleat a little bit. I was a shortstop, so as a rhythm, I had rhythm, and I knew my rhythm was off, and the ball sailed. Well,
and I can vouch for that. I've seen Ryan dance in the DR before. He has some rhythm.
Heck yeah, dude.
And so what happened for me is this. After that, my judgmental mind was playing in my head. So I kept thinking to myself, I'm pressing to throw it to the base. And what happened, I would say the byproduct of it is I was throwing slower. Basically the ball had a bit of a loop to it, and I didn't want to throw low. I had a big first baseman and throw high. But it knocks your confidence. That's the thing. Now, what happened for me, which was amazing, is that when I got to college, at the University of Maine, the head coach said to me, "Hey, you're never going to see the field as an infielder." Okay. In the infield, you get more balls. There's a lot of pressure, right? He said, you better learn how to play the outfield. He didn't even want to help me. I had like one of the grad assistants with me. And I remember the first time I was in the outfield, and I was kind of a fish out of the water. And he just said, "Hey, Ryan, the goal here, get the ball quick and get it out of your glove." Okay. That was it. That's all I had to do. And in the outfield, I had this bigger general vicinity that if I moved a player to the ball, it wasn't such a big deal. And I think for me, that's what kind of resolved the yips, really
Awesome.
did. And I knew too, when I could throw to a base, I played right and left field, that I could throw a long hop. And that's what kind of progressed me out of it. I actually had to have a position change, I would say, to make me feel less judgmental about the throws I was making.
Good. So you got past. So I got past it as well. But I think you just said it straight. I think you said it. So this is back then. I don't know. No one knows our ages. We're pretty young, but not really. But back then, that was it. The coach just said, "Hey," for me, it's like, "Hey, throw it harder. Don't aim it, just throw it." And for your coach, it's like, "Oh, you're not going to do it." Whereas, it wasn't very talked about a lot back then, especially not where I played. I had seen it with a lot of kids, but it was never talked. It was a lot of suck it up buttercup kind of thing. But now, luckily, I think things have changed and people are starting to stride more towards that mental side of the game, which is awesome. Is there, you're the scientist, is there a scientific basis behind these yips that you could short version it, or is it just everyone's different, it's just a thing?
No, I mean there was a show. I just kind of a backstory. I got into it because I got a chance for a couple days to work with Rick Ankiel. And if people don't know Rick Ankiel, he was a pitcher, a stud pitcher, like big arm.
Cannon. Absolute cannon.
When he came into the Cardinals, and he was just relied upon. All of a sudden he got the yips and he could never pitch again. And because he was so athletic, they made him an outfielder. But he had his shoulder was bothering him. And I got to work with him. And I remember just kind of listening about kind of his experience. He was talking to a reporter. I can't remember what the story was about, but they got into this. It's really something that's not so physical. We think like, definitely if you have changes in arm strength and arm position, you're going to have an effect on your release point. But that psychological piece, right? And you look at, there are some research studies, excuse me, that have, information on the yips. And a lot of the time there is this little window that goes between like your sensory motor area for your brain that pre-plans how you're going to move. And then actually the execution of how your nervous system is controlling where your arm is, your arm speed, those kinds of things. The root of it is judgmental elements. Sometimes I saw in this movie, and I forget the catcher's name, but it's comes from past trauma. Like he got through. He's a catcher that like literally like had to stand up and like flip the ball, but he could throw to second base. His fear.
Are you referring to the movie Major League?
That's what I was just wondering.
No,
it was Billy Brubaker.
It was another one on the yips on an actual, a former big league catcher. But
now, and here's the funny thing: I'm pretty sure the guy in Major League was a former professional catcher who actually got the yips, right?
It's a story, but this is a real deal thing, and so the whole episode is on trying to figure out like why this guy is so fearful throwing back to the pitcher. But when it comes to instantaneous, I can't think, collect it and throw to second base, it's automatic. And he didn't have problems with that. But he was kind of concerned of throwing away the ball, runners advancing their position. And it came down to, I think, the interaction that he had with his father, and put pressure on him as a young kid. Like the story was much deeper than the yips. So, when you don't have that kind of past trauma and it's coming up very situationally, a lot of it is this judgment. We have a judging mind about, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to look bad. Like Zach, you were talking about having scouting pressure and seeing people watching you. You start to become very internalized in that moment. For me, I had a physical problem where my cleat caught and I kind of like, it just tailed. And then it manifested into, I don't want to do this again. I let my team down. I got embarrassed. I watched my coach put his head in his hands,
That's real. Yeah.
So,
I think you said the past drama and people don't even know they have it. I think that kind of played a role. So we've all had them obviously, and we all went past them, but I tried to think back. And it came to a long realization that really played a role. And that past trauma, I think, is big, but you don't even know you have it. So kind of a thing that I think that have kind of caused me to end up in that situation is I was pretty physically talented, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I excelled in a lot of sports. So I didn't lose very often. I was usually the hardest thrower, the fastest. So when I didn't win or something didn't go my way, I didn't deal with it very well. And so when it comes to like losing in general and failing, it is talked about more now that failing is so important, especially at a young age. You got to learn to fail. I mean, we're all dads. And and teaching our kids to fail and how to properly deal with that failure is huge. And I failed, but not to the extent of where it affected my future. So like, yeah, as a little guy, no big deal. But as it started to get more serious, I had to realize that, hey, like you're gonna strike out, you're gonna get out 7 times out of 10. That's Hall of Fame. And I didn't know how to cope with failure or errors. And I think if we can learn that at a younger age, that would help tremendously. Then I had to cope with it. I did get out of it, but it did take some time. So, but as you guys have spoken, you guys have coached. I've coached just at a younger level. But you guys have coached at a high level. Do you see yips more often? Jordan, you're a high school coach right now. Do you guys see more yip situations have you seen Jordan specifically more in high school or more in the pro ball when you were in there?
I saw it more in college than anywhere when I coached in college. And I think the reason for that is college baseball is a lot more judgmental than most of the other ones. I mean, you're starting to go year round. I mean, shoot, me and Ryan work with a couple high school kids, and some of them it's like, hey, our season starts in March, so we're going to start practicing February 19th. It's like that's when we're starting. So there's not as much pressure on the general high school player, but once you get into college, I've noticed that's when everything kind of starts baking in, because now in a sense you're paying tuition. You got student loans, you have all these other things. There's a lot more pressure that starts hammering onto things, and you start playing in front of crowds. Even if it's at a small school, you still have crowds there. You have, pressure from, that girl watching in the stands or whatever it may be. Or like, shoot, I remember when I was coaching, Ryan always refers to it as the Ivy League of the West, Vanguard University. But when I was coaching there, we had a math teacher who was just living and dying on the baseball team. And we were doing pretty well. I think I'm pretty sure they're still playing pretty well over there. But then we had a guy who, I won't use his name, he threw extremely hard, but he had the yips. And we would always put him in these situations. It's like, we need just to get you comfortable with pressure. And he would go in there and he would punch out 3 guys, and then he'd go into the next inning and hit 6 in a matter of like, you blink an eye and it's like, well, there goes 3 runs, But he had like 2 really good outings in a row. And then the math teacher's like, hey, it looks like you're cured, man. Finally, you're going to start winning a whole bunch of ball games for us. And that was what sent him back into it.
Oh, no.
So it was just like those little tiny things where the school's more involved in what's going on with your game and your play and all these things. When in reality, like this math teacher, 6 months from now is going to forget that he even had a conversation with you. Probably 10 days from now, he's going to forget that he even had that conversation. And what he meant in good faith ended up being something negative for somebody else. And that's why I think I've noticed it so much more at the collegiate level, because once you get into pro ball, you've kind of already separated guys out a little bit.
That's a good point.
It still shows up, but it shows up. I guarantee you go to any college roster, there's at least one guy. You go to any pro roster and they're like, oh, I heard of a guy, or I know of Rick Ankiel, but they don't know anybody in that immediate aspect. It starts getting a little more separated in that instance. Would you agree with that, Ryan?
A lot of sense.
I would. I mean, the other thing I think about with this particular situation is like there needs to be a support network. Like some guys, some guys have, serious issues. And they don't know where to turn. It could turn them off baseball. If they're a position player and can hit, it also makes it challenging if they're just DHing, because they just have such challenges. Maybe the outfield, they have problems too. And I did have it during COVID. And Jordan, you might not remember, but do you remember we were short outfielders, and they gave us uniforms, and they're like, hey, Ryan, you were an independent league outfielder. Why don't you go handle right field? And I'm on a field with, a bunch of kind of 4A guys have had some big league time and been sent down to this alternate site, kind of in the kiddie pool in case something happens, someone catches COVID or gets hurt. And so I'm out there in right field, and I'll never forget, and it was crazy. Matt Thice, you can remember, he hit me a ball between first and second. There was nobody on, all right? And I was playing deep, and he saw, my arm wasn't very strong. and he turned at first base. And we're talking, this guy's like a, corner player, former catcher, not a quick dude, but he took that turn hard and put pressure on me. And I came in and spiked it. I threw like a 3-hopper to second, okay, from right field coming in. It was very embarrassing, but he took that on me. And I remember like the coaches would talk to him and say, hey, don't do that silly stuff. You're not going to do that in a real game. But he just kind of embarrassed me, and he's a great guy, but he's competitive. So I was thinking to myself, I felt that feeling again. Now, the key is, it's not so much like, there's also a future component, because I'm like, oh man, this is going to keep happening. When athletes are taught strategies, and that might be the support group. Like if we are all doing this now, chatting about this, telling stories. But one of the things that didn't happen to me, I don't think, in that moment, because I didn't want the ball hit to me again. I was embarrassed to throw it. I wanted to just wanted to catch a fly ball and do this to my, the second baseman. Is being able to attack those thoughts immediately. I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't want the ball hit to me again. I was like, that was super embarrassing. I can't make that throw. My arm doesn't feel good. Like your head goes everywhere. So like strategically, there has to be better resources.
That's real.
And people know it, but like they're not talking about it.
True. It's tough. It's a hard thing. It's not something and Jordan, you kind of spoke about this. Every kid's different. So what works for you is not going to work for Jimmy, and what work for Jimmy is not going to work for Chris. And it's sadly, that's not how it works. But everyone's got a different key. But I think we all had it. We all kind of spoke who our remedies of it. And that was moving Ryan to get into a different position. Jordan just getting reps, it kind of sounded like. And if you did have that post arm care, knowing you had a healthy arm, you would have felt better. Mine, honestly, what happened to mine was a coach. And when my coach left, I got a call saying, hey, I'm leaving, going to a different school. I was like, oh, dang, sorry. Gone instantly. And I was back, and my following year was fantastic. And so curing the yips is very difficult. Everyone's different, but preventing them, I think, is helpful. And one thing that for coaches out there who are listening, we're all coaches. One thing that helped me tremendously, and everyone on our team, was my sophomore year of college. My coach, fantastic, brought each kid individually before the season, said, hey, how can I make you better? What drives you to become the better self of you? And how can we jump on that and build you up? And you got kids who are like, oh, coach, I want you to mother F me. I want you to tell me I suck. And it's going to fire me up and I'm going to go. And honestly, I was a soft kid. I was like, I need encouragement. I need you to tell me I'm good. I need you to tell me things are great and what's going to happen and my hard work's going to pay off. And he treated each kid how he wanted to be treated and coached. And we excelled. And that was the best year I ever had. And I went from Yippee Longstocking to all conference. And I think that's what got me to that Division I level that I never thought I'd be. Honestly, I was like, I don't even know if I should even come back. And the coaches are like, hey, yeah, do you want to come back sophomore year? And I was like, back in my mind, I was like, I want to prove I can do it. So I came back, so it worked out well. But if coaches can treat kids individually based on their personality, I think that helps tremendously. But Jordan, you kind of spoke about there's different kinds of yips as far as preventative measures go. And I think you said about there's a command yips, there's velocity yips. And one thing about the ArmCare app is we can help with a piece of that. So Jordan, can you speak as far as command yips and velo yips, which one's which and how can we kind of prevent that?
So to give an example of it, like obviously the command yips are the ones that everybody, whether they know the word yips or not, that's your major league catcher can't throw to the pitcher, but he can throw to the bases. John Lester can't throw to pick to first base. Like there's everybody's going to have some form of it. It's just a matter of how you cope with it. And then there's what I've seen a lot of times is there is a velocity threshold yips to where a guy throws in a bullpen and he's 87, 89, 94, and then he throws in a game and he's 85, 86. But he's this great, he's a 5 o'clock hitter. It's a form of the yips when it comes down to it. There's this threshold that makes someone worried about trying. Because if they try, it's almost like a guarding mechanism where if they try and they fail, then they're going to feel they weren't adequate. But if they throttle back, there's always the excuse, well, I wasn't at my peak performance. And it's a crappy coping mechanism when it comes down to it, because you're setting yourself up to fail.
Can't
but
lose
I see
if
that
you don't
quite a
try
bit.
kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I can't fail if I didn't even try. And I will say I see that one a lot at the high school level, as opposed to the command version of it at the collegiate in the pro level. And I see it all the time. Like, you get a guy on the mound. I have one player, again, I won't use names. I've had him up to 87 on the mound for my high school guys. But then when it comes to playing in a game, there's always this magical arm pain that just appears out of nowhere. Hey, you need to be ready to face hitters. Oh, I'm a little tender. And it's
so that he'll actually express that to the coach.
Oh, and now I'm hurt. And then it's like, okay, so we don't throw you. And then he's like, hey, I'm good to throw that bullpen. We do his arm. Everything checks out. There's no issue. There's no problem. But as soon as it comes to competition, there's always a problem. There's something psychological that goes on there that if I don't compete, I don't fail. But it's like I said, it's a poor coping mechanism, because, you miss all the shots you don't take, something like that. It comes down to that same exact thing, that we look for a coping mechanism to make ourselves feel better. But in 10 years, we look back and we're like, that was a very stupid decision. So you may as well just walk through the fire anyways and just go get it done, because
that's real.
You're going to just have to do it.
I get that. Yeah. And again, this is why I brought this topic up. Again, I got it in high school and I got it in college. And when I first met Ryan, I was like, yeah, I got Yips. I thought I had everything going for me, and this kind of sucked. And you asked what position it was. I was shortstop. You're like, oh, I just would have put you in the outfield. And I really wonder.
Real quick, when you're done, remind me outfielders.
Yeah, it's like that's a good, if anyone's listening, if you're an infielder, if you're having issues throwing, it's worth a shot. I know when I threw it hard and I didn't aim, it was better, but someone just telling me to do that from my same position was tough. So that really hurt me as a shortstop. I wish I could have done that. And another thing, Ryan, you spoke about was your position change. So my sophomore year, after having that conversation with the coach, he moved me to third base. And so I went from being a shortstop and having all that time and all that responsibility and all that thinking to the hot corner, and they're gone. And I went on, and that was better for me. I didn't have to think. So I think a position change is huge. I think talking to a kid, learning his coping mechanisms and how he trains better is a good preventative measure. And then, because I moved to third for my spring season, summer ball came. My summer ball coach didn't know I played third and moved me back to short. And they kind of came back. So he moved me back to third, so I got a little bit better. But Ryan, I love that idea of moving kids to the outfield, changing position. As far as the youth age, do you have any other recommendations of different positions wise, catchers, outfielders, that you recommend?
I just think, when we come to youth, they have to have experiences throwing, in my opinion, from different viewpoints on the field, right? Like, if you always have a kid, because I was a shortstop, third baseman, and left fielder, and then I moved to right field, when you only have the same perception, it can impact them. You put a guy in fish out of water, they've never practiced in right field or first base, you got issues there. But the other thing too, with, giving kids different positional options, sometimes guys throw better from different arm angles. Like, you think of an infielder, you throw 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. That's, for a right-handed, infielder. You can change those perspectives. And some guys, like, I got one player who has an acromial problem. He can't get his arm up. For years, he's trying to jam his arm up, and there's bony obstruction. He just can't. The bones are they're hooked. So, putting that player instead of an outfielder at first base, who's a lefty, it's an easier arm path. He doesn't have to jam his arm up. In fact, like, what's taught in the infield is that if you step to your glove side on the infield, it's short, you're kind of wanting to throw low, especially in a double play such situation. Guys that step to their glove side and stand up, they end up spiking the ball or throwing it high. This is an athlete that, like, he's like, oh man, even from that perspective, I'm comfortable. So he was,
Interesting.
and he had some problems, catching, catching targets in the outfield too. It's just a long throw, and he has some natural movement, so you can find by putting guys different positions, shortening throws, sometimes elongating throws. You got an infielder that, man, like he's got this like multiple range, but in the outfield, if he's a consistent arm, and when he's running through, it's like it can be magical for a guy. And then
a lot of sense.
Yeah, once they start making plays and they start feeling comfortable, I love shortstop, but when they moved me, I felt a sense of relief. It was a weird thing. It's like, okay, I don't have that pressure anymore. Maybe it still stemmed back to throwing away that game. But I think it's important at the younger levels is to try different positions, get the athletes to see the field from different ways, like
100%.
if I'm an infielder and I'm right-handed and I have to turn double plays, being able to make pivots that are different, those things are all important.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you said that really well. Mechanics. I mean, every infield, I'm an infield guy. I couldn't tell you a thing about pitching, but infield guy, like you said, if I always teach my athletes, they're fielding, coming through, they're staying low. And if you got an athlete who stands up, he sails it. But maybe get them uncomfortable to a position where they're almost like a Jeff Bagwell shuffling stance wise to get their hands and get that lower half and make them uncomfortable. So they forget, like, this is so uncomfortable, I'm going to have to do this. And that whole mindset of their previous mechanics maybe goes away. As far as pitching goes, Jordan, is there something that you could use as a physical tool to help them? Or you kind of like, I think your guy in college, you said, just get them out there and in situations that it's not
I'm a firm believer of you only get comfortable something the more you do it. And you just have to get in there and do it whether you want to or not. You have to just keep, and that's honestly what helped me. Even when I had my nervous system, my issue with my hand, all these other things, just keep going. Just use me for one hitter. I don't care. Just get me out there, do anything you can to get comfortable with the scenario. But also the big thing is you need to have some kind of system for yourself to give a positive affirmation. Because the biggest thing that everybody does is you make that bad throw and internally you're telling yourself how horrendous you are. I don't know how that helps the scenario. And right now, both of you guys on this call are like, please don't hit me the ball because I'm going to throw this thing away. And then when you get hit the ball and then you throw it away, you're like, you freaking piece of crap. Like, how much worse can you be? And it's like, well, I don't know how that's making you any better of a baseball player. So you need to have something internally that you can turn to on your own and make yourself turn the page, get over it. All those, old sayings, you need something like that. But even more important is you need to have the like Ryan's talking about, the support system that when you go home, when you're on the car ride home, since a lot of this is going to be based on that youth athlete, when you're driving back home, it's like you can't have mom and dad lecturing you about how horrendous you did in the game. Everyone's aware of how bad we just did.
Yep, you don't like,
it's me. Even if there was 5 people in the stands, we're aware of it. And one of the things that honestly helped me in that same season was I was pitching in Yuma and I had bases loaded. I got brought in on church night and I hung a breaking ball, gave up a grand slam and got booed on church night. And I was like, doesn't get too much worse than this.
Yeah.
So that honestly helped me get a little bit better with it. It was just like at a certain point that I'm like, I don't freaking care anymore. And I ended up finishing out the season pretty good, so
there you go. Yeah.
But it's just one of those things you have to be willing to have something that you can turn to. And people don't realize how much stress there actually is when you're playing, even at the high school level. And then travel ball just keeps getting worse and worse to where they keep putting this unneeded stress on these 4 games in a 3-day window or 4 games in 2 days. The kid's already mentally exhausted. The nutrition's not there. And then on the car ride home, it's like, well, how come you threw a curveball, 2-2 instead of a changeup 2-2? And it's like, dude, this kid is 12. Let's play the game. Number one, let's not expect them to perform like a big leaguer and put major league expectations on them. And you see a lot of the yips show up in middle-class white kids. That's where a lot of it shows up. And like, that's where a lot of the stress is in the game, is on middle-class white kids. Cause there's this expectation that, well, we did a travel tournament, so you should be playing at, USC or UCLA or, Vanguard. You should be going to Vanguard, like the best team in the freaking world.
100%.
You should be going there. So,
my man,
there's a lot of stuff that these parents put these expectations on there on a 12-year-old. And then that creates that trauma that you're referencing that they don't even know is there. And then when they don't succeed in that expectation, and I think that's why, just in my mind, a lot of it shows up in college, is because all of a sudden there's this expectation that's thrown. I'm not a psychologist, but there's this expectation thrown on a guy, and then they don't achieve that. And then it's like, well, why am I not doing this? And they just keep, oh man, I'm not as good as I should have been. So
That's
hopefully
real.
that makes any
Parents,
sense. Or I rambled. I don't know.
no, the parents make a big difference, and kids don't know, and parents don't know it. So they think they're encouraging when it's really, so that's why it's good to have that open communication, and be able to tell. I mean, again, back in the day, you tell your parents you're sad or something, it's kind of like, oh, really? But I think nowadays people are they want kids, like, tell me if something is bothering you, we'll work it out, and be accepting of that. Again, not getting the parenting advice, but another thing, and so we've talked about how we got through it, some measures of being preventative measures, how to possible cope with it for coaches. But as far as, I think another thing to finish it off, just preparation. ArmCare, obviously huge. It can build velocity, build strength, and help and let you know. So Ryan, I know the connection of body brain and knowing that you are prepared, I think, can play a huge role. As far as preparation goes, do you think that impact of knowing you work hard every day could be beneficial to being that preventive measure for Yips?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's so important is the utilization of the data, right? For me, and I love seeing this with my players, is the ArmCare app is very reinforcing. I deal with a lot of injured players in my consulting business, and when they see the rise of their strength and they see themselves getting out of all the alerts, and now the app's all blue and everything is, going well. I just love that they see this and say, okay, yeah, my arm is good. My arm is strong. It starts to develop an affirmation. So the same thing with the Yips. Yeah, you're really kind of nailing one aspect. They may be thinking, I got a weak arm, I don't know if I could get it there. Is one thing. And the information that we have from an objective physical standpoint is solid. You got lots of tools that you can go out and kind of figure out how you're moving and kind of dial in things that might be a problem, right? Wearables and everything else. The hard part is the psychology piece. That's the part that we haven't hit yet. That even though a player might have a strong arm, overcoming that is an issue. And I know there are a lot of companies out now that they're working on sports psych apps, basically.
That's huge.
Getting that athlete in the right place. One of the things that I do with my athletes when they come in, I do an intake. And if parents haven't seen this before, it's called the sport anxiety scale. And the athlete basically identifies all these different situations, and they label their potential thought process. Are they distracted easily? Do they have psychosomatic responses? So for example, when you feel tight, you feel your heart racing, like these things disrupt your natural motion. There's 4 layers of them, and we score them, but now we do have objective data to fix them with data. So, the key is how do you get objective so that, you can overcome some of these barriers, you can build confidence in the athlete, but you can streamline. We talked about an individualized approach to coaching, which is, is the name of the game. It's not, the kind of the one size fits all, but as a parent, your kids are, achieving, especially those people who have our device, and the parents are like, they're giving us testimonials, how much they've gained arm strength, how fast they're throwing, to kind of keep in that train to build up the athlete. And like, what you said, kid makes a mistake in the field, the throwing error. And like mine, my mom was pretty good about it. She didn't talk about it. She knew I was embarrassed and, really ticked off. But as a parent, if you can kind of, lessen your response to the kid making a mistake and say, hey man, shake it off. This
even body language
of them, and that blend going to take kids far, in my opinion, and
love
overcome these things.
Yep, I like that. Yeah. So I mean, so we've all had them. We all beat them. We preventative measures work. I mean, knowing you trained hard. Sports psych's huge. The academy I work with now, Lightning Academy in Colorado, they actually bring in sports psychs during their academy, and they have a whole session about 30 minutes of just working on their minds. It's awesome. So I think it's more prevalent these days, which is huge. So hopefully yips are going down. Again, coaches, talk to your players, know who does best and what kind of coaching form, whether they're like to be coach tough or coach soft. I think that's big. Changing positions could be good. A fixture, changing mechanics. There's a lot out there that are helpful. And I think we hit on a lot of them. So I wish I had this information when I was in high school and college, but the yips suck. They're not fun, but that's the biggest thing. Whoever you're closest with, coaches, heck, you can call us. We can talk to you about the yips. We all got it. So, but that's great. Is there anything else you guys want to add as far as preventative measures, something for coaches, players, parents, anything else? We've kind of hit all the aspects of the
I would
game.
say just a fun story real quick.
Love it.
When I was working for the NPA under Tom House, I saw a couple of their coaches on the stream. So some of them were actually there for this story. Again, I won't use names, but we had a left-hander who was a second rounder with an organization. He got to AA, and then he got the yips. And it was because all of a sudden they're talking about agent, we're going to get you on the 40 man, all these things. And this, oh my gosh, that sick to your feeling stomach comes along. So, the organization actually sent him out to us because Tom actually does a very good job on dealing with the yips. For the guys that don't know, he's got some pretty good solutions to it. So they sent him out, and Tom had kind of seen that his was a visual thing. So he went from, closing one eye, closing the other eye, no eyes. And this kid was throwing bullpens blindfolded, dotting strikes. And then it got to the point where as soon as the blindfold would come off, he couldn't throw it anywhere. He was like not even coming close to hitting the nets. So Tom, I remember it was just funny. He told me, he goes, look, man, at a certain point, you're going to have to just go to post at this thing because you can't throw a blindfold on in AA and go, throw a hitter in the box. Let's do this. I don't think anybody's going to want to face you. But for him, it was visual. So for him, it was closing an eye and learning how to pitch there. You see, whether you love him, hate him, indifferent, whatever it is you want to think, Trevor Bauer has a lot of videos going over throwing with different visual cues as well. So whether you like somebody or hate them, everybody has something to bring to the table. That's important to learn from everybody when it comes down to it. And if closing an eye helps you, try it out.
There you go. Closing an eye, work hard, give 110. When pain doesn't mean stop, pain means push. And if you can push through that, you can push through a lot. So, but yeah, they suck. And I'm sorry if anyone's ever gotten them or if you're going to get them at some point. I hope not, but it's a tough thing. But we're here to help if anyone ever chat or to learn about. And I love that the ArmCare can show where you are at to know that, hey, things are going to be okay. And if not, then you can work hard to get through it because it's only going to get harder from youth on. So, but that's cool, guys. I really appreciate you letting me be a part of it. I'm sorry we didn't get to see Matt's beautiful face and smart mind, but I thought I'd mix things up a bit. So, if you guys got nothing else, man, I appreciate it and hope you'll be on the next one.
Awesome.
Awesome, dudes. Alrighty.